Okay. So, before I get started, how many of you guys have been out of the country? Just raise your hands. Okay, that's a pretty sizable amount of people. How many people have been out of town? Okay, that's a lot more. Okay. So, I think traveling is one of our greatest privileges, one of our greatest powers even. So, you're sitting on a 6-hour plane ride, and let's say two-week cruise, for example, and in just those 2 weeks, in just those 6 hours, you can find yourself in a completely exotic culture, something that you couldn't even understand before, or probably can't even understand now. So when we consider travel, when I consider travel, I think of leisure. I think of a vacation. I think the warm summer nights in the Hawaiian Isles or fun backpacking trips in Europe. But the reality that we have to remember with this type of travel is that most of the times we come back to the safety of a hotel room, in which room we just forget about the troubles that we're having in the real world, and we're disconnected. So the second type of travel I'm going to talk to you guys about is something I call transformative travel. It's a travel where you insert yourself into somebody else's world for a couple of days, somebody else's life for a couple of days. I should tell you guys right now that what I'm going to tell you guys about is like nothing along the lines. So I wasn't naked and afraid in the wilderness, unfortunately. And I wasn't on the first expedition to the Americas, although that would have been cool. Yeah. Sorry. But what I am going to tell you guys about is last June, 2017. So in June 2017, for a week in Honduras, I volunteered with a nonprofit organization called One World Surgery. And it's a nonprofit, and we were a medical brigade consisting of volunteer physicians, nurses, and team volunteers, just like myself and my best friend, Soren, assembled from all over the country to go down to countries like Honduras to give medical care to the families that needed it. So I'm sitting on the plane, landing in Tegucigalpa, that's the capital city of Honduras, and I'm not even thinking about the trip at all. In fact, there's only one line from The Wizard of Oz that's playing through my head, and you guys probably know it. It's, "You're not in Kansas anymore." And I wasn't. So I'm sitting here in my plane seat, and all I can see outside is the rolling green Honduran hills. And then I walk outside of the plane to feel the warm, humid tropical air. I look up, I see giant gargantuan clouds. And I look beyond and I see the sprawling Tegucigalpan urban landscape. Long story short, I was in a different universe. It wasn't just I wasn't outside of the country. It wasn't just I wasn't outside of Temecula. I was in a different universe. So naturally, I compared it to Temecula. So what do we see here? We see brown rocky mountains. On hot summer days, we have the hot, dry summer air. Most of the times, I mean, I guess not now, but we see cloudless skies. We've been getting a little bit of rain recently. And to top it off, we have cookie-cutter suburbia, the idea of this track home, of the neighborhood. So back to the story, I'm in Honduras. I'm outside of the country for the first time, so I need a couple of rules, right? Rule number 1, don't do anything stupid or illegal. Well, okay. Rule number 2, have common sense, just be safe. And it's hard to get my backpack stolen if I'm just holding on to it, right? Rule number 3, this is a little bit more personal, but I'm an asthmatic, or was as a kid. So rule number 3 naturally was don't forget my inhaler. So pretty soon I realized that these rules were really simple-minded. Just, there's nothing I can do about that. So why were we here in Honduras? We were here, or the One World Surgery was here to provide surgical care to the families that needed it. That didn't answer the question I had. The question I had was, why was I in Honduras? And unfortunately, I didn't have an answer. To some days, and even now, I probably still don't. I knew I was there because as a kid, I'd always wanted to be a physician. I'd always wanted to be a doctor. But I never really answered the question, what was I doing down there? Why did I want to be down there? So throughout that week, I was going to have to answer that question. The first thing I learned how to do, before even touching a scalpel, before even meeting a patient, was to wake up to the world around me. So before we can do anything, we arrive at the airport, we're supposed to head out to this place called Rancho Santa Fe. That is the site of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, which is an orphanage called Our Little Siblings. That orphanage is an hour away from the airport, through the Honduran mountains, winding and turning. So we're riding through this bus, and my best friend of 12 years is sitting right next to me. And the first thing that we can notice, and the first thing that we can even help to notice, is miles and miles of hillside shanty towns. So we've never really seen or experienced poverty up close. Sure, we've seen it in our classes. We've seen advertisements, we've seen public service announcements, but we were never really there up close. So here we are, and the only question that we have in our minds, we don't voice it, but it's there, and we know it's there, is people actually have to live here. People actually have to live here. I should tell you right now that people's homes were missing walls and roofs, and a lot of these homes were just mounds of bricks and sheet metal. Electricity and running water that we, I don't want to say take for granted, but that we have here, it's just a luxury for a lot of people. And that Wi-Fi that we tend to complain about sometimes when it goes out, it's just a dream for them. So eventually, we end up getting to the orphanage, and we're greeted by the faces of 300 kids, ages 1 through 13. And they're all orphans. They're all people whose parents have died or have been lost to sickness, violence, or drugs, or all of the above here in Honduras. So these kids are forced to face this world alone. Within the orphanage, we reach the Holy Family Surgery Center, where we see the faces of more patients. And these patients have been waiting anywhere from months to years even, waiting just for volunteers, just like myself, just to get down here in Honduras and give them a shot at a better life. And these patients range anywhere, from a blind 5-year-old kid to an elderly man with advanced prostate cancer. But one thing I noticed with all of these patients, and they're waiting and they seem miserable, but the fact was they all seemed to be smiling. I had no idea why. And I don't say that because I'm blind or oblivious to it. The only question I had at that moment is, why were these people smiling? So I come back to the United States for a couple of months, and then I realized the second thing I learned how to do in Honduras was to look forward to the opportunities that were ahead of me, instead of fearing the challenges that were looming overhead. I had a wonderful opportunity to assist a brigade urologist, the mother of my best friend. And she would take care of cases ranging from transurethral resections of the prostate, which we call TERPs for short, to a bilateral orchiectomy. I'm not going to tell you what the second one is. You're free to look that one up. But long story short, one day we encountered this patient, and he just exited out of a successful TERPs procedure. And once he's out of the operating room, the normal procedure is you get out of the operating room, you're in phase 1 recovery, to take care of all the pain, and then phase 2, and then they're out. But that very day, the same patient, for whatever reason, we call it impulse maybe, I decided to speak to him and ask him how he was doing, in Spanish. And I wasn't as fluent as I wanted to be back then, but I asked him, "Hola señor, ¿cómo está usted?" "Hello sir, how are you doing?" That conversation was very short-lived, mainly because he couldn't speak at all. And the reason why is because he was in pain. And the only thing he could give me was a painful smile and a thumbs up. So it was right there that I realized, what did it mean to help another person? Because it wasn't just his body that was healing, even though he was smiling through all this pain. It was the soul that was inside of him that's being lifted up. And it was that power that made him smile despite his pain that he was having. So experiences like these, I had my answer to why I was in Honduras. It was because of these experiences, these little moments that I had with these people. I could reflect as long as I want about what it means to help other people, what community service means, what it means to me. But it wasn't until I was right there in person, seeing that man giving me the thumbs up, Or seeing that blind boy I talked to you guys about moments earlier, that smiled to the sky to see those very same clouds that I saw for the first time after he regained his sight after a surgery. That's the power that traveling has for us. And I think, I'm going to tell you guys one more story about a sign that I saw posted high on a tree. I'm walking one of my last days in Honduras around Rancho Santa Fe. And I see all sorts of sights. We see murals, we see happy children playing around. But I walk around and I see this tree for the only tree for a couple of meters. There's a couple of them around. But what made this one special was the fact that posted high on it was a small wood sign with a painted message, which is really simple, which read this. In Spanish, toma la decisión de tener éxito y luego actúa como no tuvieses otra opción. I'm going to translate that, don't worry. Take the decision to succeed and later act like you have no other option. That's great advice. And I think that's something we all can do. And this is what traveling was, I figured out after months into senior year, almost a year since I went to Honduras. This is what traveling meant. It was the opportunity to wake up to the world around you, as much as it was the opportunity to look forward to the opportunities ahead of you instead of fearing the challenges that were looming overhead. It was the opportunity to venture out and beyond what we call our comfort zone, and truly take the decision to make a risk, take the decision to succeed, and later just act like we have no other option. I think that's something we all can do.